always love the webinars in the beginning of the year. You know, you start fresh, people aren't exhausted, they don't have webinar burnout, and so you get a high participation rate. So I always love the webinars in the beginning of the year. So let's go ahead and get started. I appreciate everyone for joining us today. We've got some good information to share with you today. You know, whether you are a director of benefits, you're a benefits broker, you're a consultant, we've got something for everyone today. My name is Tyrone Squires. I'm managing director of Transparent RX, the country's very first fiduciary model PBM. That's really, you can't dispute that. And I've been in the industry now for 2 decades, starting out with Eli Lilly as a drug sales rep, moved inside where I negotiated with PBMs to get our branded products onto the PBM's formulary, owned a mail order pharmacy for 5 years, cashed out of that business because I was frustrated with the industry and the small reimbursements coming back from PBMs. Glad I did that because they're putting independent pharmacies out of business. I'm not a fan of that. And then for the last 10 years, been growing slowly but surely, Transparent RX. And then I've got Day Lee, who's my partner in these webinars. And I'm going to let Day introduce himself. Go ahead, Day.
All right, thanks, Tyrone. My name is Day Lee. I'm a pharmacist attorney. I'm a shareholder at Buchanan Ingalls Rooney. And as Tyrone indicated, you know, Tyrone and I do these education webinars for brokers as well as plan sponsors to, you know, further educate the folks in the pharmacy industry. And at the end of the day, we want to achieve, you know, radical transparency that, you know, not only reduces the drug spend, but also make the drugs, you know, affordable for the patients. And today, you know, during today's webinar, you know, we'll discuss the industry updates, developments, the loopholes in the PBM agreements, and what to watch out for.
All right, and by the way, and so Day is showing me up today. He's got the suit, he's got the tie, and this is why he's got top billing on the cover slide here. So with that, let me go ahead and dive in here. We don't do fluff. We tell you what we see. We tell you what we know in hopes that you can put it into practice in your own business. So for us, when we're talking about optimizing pharmacy benefits, the status quo is you start with pricing and you try to get better discounts, or maybe change the pricing benchmark to NADAC from AWP, try to get bigger rebate guarantees. We've got a different spin on that. And what we're trying to do is eliminate asymmetric information. In other words, PBMs have access to a ton of information, more than just the amount of information that they have access to. They've actually got the skill set and the knowledge to interpret the information that they do have. Their clients, on the other hand, lack the same amount of information that the PBMs have. They also lack the knowledge and skill set to interpret the information that they have. PBMs for the past almost 2 decades now have been leveraging asymmetric information to their financial advantage. If the information was symmetric, or in other words, information success, then we wouldn't be having all the problems and all the new pending regulations that are coming at us at a very, very rapid pace. This is a case in point when I talk about asymmetric information. And let me just tell you, as an independent, standalone PBM, one of our biggest challenges is when we're prospecting and we're calling directors of benefits, the first thing out of their mouth is, well, I want you to talk to our broker. right? We have a broker that handles all of that. It's the directors of benefits, the CFO, they're the fiduciary. They're responsible for having the same amount of knowledge as their broker has, as their consultants have. But we know in most cases they don't. That's why they kick the can down the road. Here's the problem with that. In this email, I had did a presentation. And by the way, this director of compensation and benefits is for a health plan. It is for a health plan. The company itself has over 30,000 members. And so when we concluded the presentation, I said the next step is we need to get some data. We want to show you what the problem areas are. Where are your opportunities for savings? The problem was when they requested that information, it wasn't the PBM that said we couldn't get it to them. It was their own broker who had a pharmacy consulting practice internally. This was no surprise to them. It was set up that way intentionally. This is a perfect example of asymmetric information. Radical transparency cannot be achieved unless the information is symmetric. We know now how PBMs, and by the way, this information is more well known than it was 6 months ago by Nephron Research. And the point I'm making here is all the different ways PBMs are generating not just revenue, but hidden revenue. And without having access to the necessary information, it's hard to determine how much a client, how much your client is actually paying the PBM to be the PBM. That's why we're trying to break down these silos. This information out of the state of Ohio was about in 2017. And I'm sharing this with you today to make a point that the state of Texas and the Attorney General of the state of Texas just filed another lawsuit. And I wish I had time. I might do that when Day is doing his part against Caremark. And they uncovered spreads, not the traditional spreads, but these were spreads after the claim was adjudicated, DIR fees. So the PBMs are charging, in other words, a clawback after the claim has been adjudicated, after it's been paid for, weeks, sometimes months later, they come back and charge the pharmacy an additional fee. That's a spread, folks. That is a spread. If it is happening to Medicaid programs or in Medicaid programs run by the states, then commercial plan sponsors, regardless of what you're being told, it is happening to you. Now, and I'm not saying that spreads in and of themselves are bad. They are bad when the third party payer has no idea what they amount to. If a spread is taking place and you're okay with the amount the PBM is retaining, then I'm okay with it. But if it's happening and you don't know what it amounts to, and you prefer the spread to be the way you pay the PBM its administrative fee, then that's okay. But if you don't know what it amounts to, that is bad. And that is not radical transparency. We talked about spreads. Let's talk about rebates here really quickly. There are rebate spreads as well as the network, pharmacy network pricing spreads. I did this for a living. where we would negotiate as a manufacturer with people how much we're going to pay them. There's a big bucket of dollars available. And then through the PBM's guidance, we would then determine where those dollars would go. Is it going to go into formulary rebates, market share rebates? How are those dollars going to be allocated? The PBM is now trying to hold on to as much of those dollars as they can. So the PBM has negotiated these types of rebate payments. It is trying, when it is not a fiduciary, truly fiduciary or radically transparent PBM, it is trying to hold on to all of these dollars itself. And if the third party payer is lucky, it gets all of the formulary rebates. If the contract is really bad, they only get a part of the formulary rebates. But the formulary rebates are small when we compare them to administrative fees now, or market share rebates or price protection rebates, and there's probably 7 or 8 different other names for rebates. On this particular slide here, this administrative fee is not the same administrative fee you or your client might pay for an account manager, a call center, access to an online portal where you can go in and look at metrics, or a member portal, or the electronic claims adjudication process. This administrative fee is a rebate. It's a rebate paid by the manufacturer to the pharmacy benefit manager. The technical name is a GPO management fee, or a GMF. And so this is how the rebate aggregation system looks today. Everyone is being funneled through, is either in the process of, or is currently being funneled through one of the rebate GPO aggregators. Day is going to talk more about that here in a second. So the goal is to get as close to the rebate. Listen, if I didn't enjoy having something to get out of bed to fight for every day, I might be pulling what little hair I have left out of my head. The brazenness, the unwillingness of, we know who the PBMs are, to change their bad business models. They are hanging on with whatever they can to maintain the status quo. And so they've created now these GPOs, and they've essentially tied the hands of manufacturers to where now they are the only ones with contracts with the manufacturers, and everyone else has to deal with them to earn these rebates. The problem with the rebate administrative fees is they go to, let's call it the big PBMs, and those fees reduce the rebate pool to every entity below them. One word of caution here, really quickly. Obviously, the closer you are to the GPO, the better. But even more important than being close to the GPO is the contract that the aggregator has with the GPO, and the contract the third party payer has with the rebate aggregator. In other words, there could be an entity that is here but has a bad contract, and there could be an entity here with a radically transparent contract, and the rebates it receives can be higher than the rebates from an entity closer to the GPO if that contract is bad. It all boils down to the contract when we're talking about pricing. And so PBMs will say, we're passing back all the rebates, or we're only keeping 3% of the rebates. Well, in the state of Texas, their information dispels that notion, because PBMs are required to report any monies that we take in from drug manufacturers. And you can see here in this data that PBMs are in fact retaining a significant amount of revenue from drug manufacturers. And by the way, you may be thinking, well, 13%, that's not too bad. Well, this information considers state entities, right? Large cities. What's an employer? What's happening to an employer with 500 employees? You could easily multiply that 13% times 2 to 3x. This is an example of radical transparency. This is a rebate remittance form. Our PBM has been sharing this for 10 years. We don't enter or won't entertain contracting with a rebate aggregator where we can't get this information. There are PBMs far larger than us that didn't negotiate this in their arrangements with their rebate aggregators. This is why when I go back to that diagram, you may be closer to the GPO, but if you did a poor job in negotiating a contract with them, the rebates you receive might be less than an entity that isn't as close to the GPO. The rebate remittance forms allow you to get to lowest net cost. What's the point of a rebate? It's not so that HR could throw a Christmas Eve or Christmas party. The point of rebates is to lower the cost of the individual drug claim. If you don't have claim level data, how do you know what you paid for the drug? We got to move on. It's 2025. Don't settle for the optics anymore. All right. And this is vertical integration has never been good. And this is what it looks like today. It could be very powerful if the intent was truly to build efficiencies for the payers of the service, but it's been used to increase the revenue of the providers. Dave?
Yep. Thanks, Tyrone. All right. So just to touch on, revisit the vertical integration, as well as the rebates and the fees that Tyrone discussed. Okay. Vertical integration allows opaqueness. Vertical integration allows the PBM-owned rebate aggregators to hide data, to hide rebates, and they also bake in their own fees, right? And these fees, sometimes they say it's administrative fee, But when based on my experience, when I actually audit the contract between rebate aggregator and a manufacturer, there are other fees. These fees can be, whatever jargon they could throw on. These are the fees that are off of whack, meaning off of the rebates that's supposed to be passed on to the plan sponsor. Okay, I'm not saying that rebate, fees are bad. I'm not, somebody has to make money, right? Everybody has bills to pay. Okay, but at what point do we say, hey, enough is enough? Okay, and if you're hiding fees, then obviously you're hiding the fact that you're making X dollar amount using the claims paid by the plan sponsor. And if the fees are disclosed, that's fine. And if the fees are disclosed to the plan sponsor and the plan sponsor accepts that, and then with that understanding, go into the contractual relationship with the PBM or PBM on rebate aggregator, that's fine. Right now, the issue is this vertical integration of the PBM to rebate aggregator down to PBM owned or affiliated pharmacies are driving up the cost of the drugs, driving up the cost of the drug spend, and making drugs not readily available. And that is the issue. And now, I mean, it's 2025, as Tyrone said, like we have to move on. Okay, and I think the landscape has changed and is continued to change, and because more plan sponsors will be educated, more patients will be educated. We just have to go, continue our efforts. So what you see here is a Johnson and Johnson class action lawsuit filed by one of their employees, right? And that employee alleged that Johnson and Johnson, as a plan sponsor of the employee's prescription drug benefits plan, failed to properly manage the plan and the drug spend, ultimately negatively impacting her premium out-of-pocket costs. So the allegations include breach of fiduciary duty, breach of prudence, breach of loyalty. This was the first case of the first lawsuit of its own kind, but it's not the last one. Okay, because the same plaintiff's firm filed another lawsuit on behalf of another plan sponsor, which was Wells Fargo. Next slide, please. So, what is the breach of fiduciary duty? The employers under the ERISA, they owe fiduciary duty to the plan participants. Okay, meaning as a fiduciary, you have to act in the best interest of the participant. You have to, and there should not be a conflict of interest. And um, and the relationship and especially the finance side of it must be transparent. So if you fail those duties, then essentially you breach the fiduciary duty that you owe as a fiduciary to the plan participant. And fiduciary duty also extends to the third parties or the vendors. There's a, I could go, there's a functional fiduciary duty. So in my cases, or in my opinion, the cases that I handle, PBMs, traditional PBMs, they owe fiduciary duty because they are the exclusive provider of the PBM services. They make up the reimbursement rates that they're going to pay on to the pharmacies, and and charge the plan sponsor, and they're the exclusive vendor or exclusive vendor or service provider to negotiate rebate. Okay, of course they're going to say, oh, we don't owe fiduciary duty, all that. However, at the end of the day, if you look at the contract, if you look at the services provided by traditional PBM to a plan sponsor, they are acting as a fiduciary. Okay, so if as a fiduciary, as a plan, the plan administrator or the plan sponsor itself, they have to take control. Starting with the RFP, selecting the PBM, negotiating and drafting the PBM agreement, and making sure that the plan sponsor reviews and agrees on the pricing, the reimbursement rate, the rebate, and the formulary and network of pharmacies. Because if you, and I'm sure you guys know, if you look at a cookie cutter PBM agreement by a traditional PBM, they require their specialty drugs to be filled by or dispensed from their own specialty pharmacies. They make so much money on that. Next slide, please.
If I can really quickly, the word prudence is used several times in number 7 here on the screen, and I just want to speak to that from my own personal experience teaching pharmacy benefits for the last decade. I looked up the definition for prudence. Here's the definition: skill and good judgment in the use of resources. I blame the traditional and non-fiduciary and non-rapid transparent PBMs for taking advantage of their clients. They could do better, the PBMs, no question about it. We can do better. The other piece of that is the buyers themselves allowed themselves to be taken advantage of by the PBMs by not being skillful. I've been teaching it for 10 years, and I've had the highest level of consultants, of brokers, directors of benefits, of extremely large institutions, even the government's procurement office. Half the students that take our course fail. Half of them fail. It's not designed to trick people. It's designed to allow them to sit at the table with the PBM and fight with confidence.
All right, just to piggyback on Tyron's comment about prudence, and of course there's the duties of loyalty and prudence. So what are they? So duty of loyalty requires a fiduciary to act solely in the interest of the plan participant and beneficiaries. Okay, what about prudence? So fiduciary must act with care, skill, prudence, and diligence that a prudent person familiar with such matters would use. So, in a nutshell, fiduciary must act in the best interest of the participant and the plan itself, and provide the care, and then put the plan participant's interest above anybody else. That's the duty. That's the fiduciary duty of loyalty, duty of prudence. And plan sponsors and the administrators and consultant, we really have to think about that. Are we doing that? Are we demonstrating the reasonable level of prudence and loyalty in managing my plan's drug spend or benefit design? If the answer is no, then it is likely or it's probable that you breached that duty. Okay, and Johnson and Johnson lawsuit, the defendants not only include Johnson and Johnson, it includes the directors of the benefit administration or the committee. Okay, because the fiduciary duty extends to individual level, the person who's making the judgment on behalf of, or decisions on behalf of the plan and / or plan participants. Okay, so what would a prudent fiduciaries do? They would negotiate PBM agreements. in the best interest of the plan and the plan participants. Okay, they would audit the PBM. They would audit not only the spread in the prescription drug reimbursement, but also the rebate. Okay. Next slide, please. I think Tyrone is having, might be having some issues. So let me just go over the other cases in the meantime. So, okay. So as I indicated before, the this plaintiff's firm who filed or who represent the plaintiff in the Johnson & Johnson lawsuit filed another case. And that case is Wells Fargo lawsuit, right? So Wells Fargo lawsuit was filed by the same firm. It's a copycat action at the end of the day, okay? And the claims are the same, the allegations are the same. You know, the core issue is these employers paid enormous amount of money to the PBM, and in both cases it was Express Scripts. Okay, and indicating that there was a drug that the plan paid for about $12,000, right? Hold on, give me one. Sorry about that. So Tyrone's internet just went down. So I'm gonna carry on. Okay. All right. So if the plan, I mean, Johnson and Johnson and Wells Fargo, you know, they paid 12,000 or 14,000 on a single drug, but the plaintiffs are claiming that the same drugs are available at a open market. Like for example, Mark Cuban's cost plus drugs, and the drug might have costed $50 or $25, right? So think about it. So if participant the participants are getting charged they pay premiums on a monthly basis, right? And the premium is based off of the total drug spend of the plan. And the plan or the plan sponsor is allowing enormous charges of or paying a lot of money on drugs that are available at a much cheaper price. So the premium goes up every year. Okay. And the out-of-pocket expense, like copay, deductible, they go up as the drug price of that claim goes, or the price of that drug claim goes up. And that is the crux of the issue in these two lawsuits. You know, the crux of the issue is, as a plan sponsor, you fail to manage. You fail to manage the plan. You put your head in the sand, and then you just allow that PBM to just take advantage of you, which resulted in higher drug spend, higher out-of-pocket expense for the plan participant. And the plan sponsor in and of itself is a fiduciary. Hence, the plan sponsor failed or breached the fiduciary duty owed to the plan participant. And that is the crux of these lawsuits. All right, and are there? I mean, is this novel lawsuit the Johnson and Johnson? Yeah, I told you, it's the first of its kind. Okay. However, it's not the last, because Wells Fargo was the second case, and I'm confident that there will be more lawsuits like this. But what are the plan sponsors doing? Are they calling their consultants or their risk attorneys or attorneys like me to mitigate the same the risk of employee lawsuit? In a way, they are, but not to the level that I expected. You know, um, they are. I think plan sponsors and including employers are obviously monitoring these lawsuits, but they're not, taking the next steps. Some of them they already have in order to mitigate the risk, but others they have not because they blindly trust their PBMs. Okay, with the under the illusion of, oh, I'm reducing my drug spend because um I receive rebates on a quarterly basis. But like I told you, and as Tyro indicated, the vertical integration. There are major rebate aggregators in the market right now that are all owned by the PBMs, right? So Zinc, owned by CVS Caremark, Ascent Health, out of Switzerland, owned by Express Scripts, Amistar, out of Ireland, owned by Optum RX. So because of all these, opaque model or the vertical integration model, allows the PBMs to take advantage of the market, take advantage of the plan sponsors, and then try to try to get try to get the most money out of each plan sponsor. I think Tyrone is back. Tyrone, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Perfect. I was on slide 17.
All right.
All right. So this is another case, not really a plan sponsor case, but it was filed by plan sponsor Osceola County against Gallagher. Saying that, hey, the broker did not uh, you know did not represent our best interest. In fact, the broker made millions of dollars in commissions, and I believe, and then they settled out of court. All right, next slide. Kraft Heinz versus Aetna, similar case. Kraft Heinz has alleged that the Aetna has taken more than $1 billion, B, like capital B, to pay for providers for medical services provided to plan participants. Okay, and then it accuses Aetna of paying millions of dollars that should have never been paid. Another example of a breach of fiduciary duty. The status of this case is that the case got dismissed voluntarily without prejudice. I believe the case is still being litigated in a private arbitration, so we won't know because we won't know the outcome because arbitrations are confidential in nature. Next slide, please. I love this slide. The shoes have dropped. There was Johnson & Johnson lawsuit, Wells Fargo lawsuit, same plaintiff's firm, and another plaintiff's firm is actually recruiting employee plaintiffs, Target employees, State Farm employees, Lockheed Martin employees. There will be more lawsuits. So what do you do as a consultant or as a plan administrator or the plan sponsor? You have to take control of the contract and the relationship, and you have to start auditing the data, right? But are the traditional PBMs gonna just hand over the data? No, they're not gonna do that. I have cases where I had to file arbitration in order to get the data. Why are they making it so hard? Because after you look at the data, you're gonna find spread. You're gonna find inflated invoices, inflated drug reimbursement rates. or invoices, and you'll see missing rebates, whether it be missing rebates and fees or just missing rebates in the totality. Okay. This is like traditional spread, like claim processing. That is a provision that I took from a publicly available plan sponsor PBM agreement. You know, if you look at it, it's literally the plan sponsor is handing over a blank check to that PBM, because the PBM is allowed to keep the difference. Okay, the keyword is the difference between what the PBM invoiced the plan sponsor and the reimbursement paid by the PBM to independent pharmacies. So let's say I'm a PBM, I charge a plan $100, and then I keep 80 and then pay the pharmacy $20. I keep 80, it's pure profit. It's a great business model. Is it ethical? In my opinion, no. Is that a breach of fiduciary duty? Yes. But the plan sponsor has allowed that. So you have to take control. Again, this is a provision from a publicly available PBM agreement about rebates. So let's take a look at this language. Administrator will pay the plan sponsor 100% of rebates that administrator, which is PBM, receives. So let's say a PBM will pay a plan sponsor 100% of the rebates that the PBM receives. But think about it, there are PBM-owned rebate aggregators. The administrator does not include the rebate aggregator and the rebates as well as the fees retained by the rebate aggregator. And the plan sponsor doesn't know. So you need the data. Okay, you have to demand the data, and you have to make sure that you receive the data as a contractual right. So you have to craft or start negotiating to draft a contract that is fair to you. Otherwise, the PBM, the traditional PBM, they are going to hide the data. They're going to say, oh, under the contract, we're not allowed to give it to you. It's our proprietary data. It's not. These are the data for the drug claims that plan sponsors paid for. How is that proprietary? It's not. And they're making it very hard to not share it with you. Why? Again, you will find dirt. You will find money. You will find money that should have been relayed to you so that the plan or plan sponsor can reduce the drug spend. If you don't reduce the drug spend, not only your drug spend is going to go up, your plan participants out of pocket is going to go up, the premium is going to go up, and the actual drug price, they all go up. They continue to go up. And who's benefiting from that? Traditional PBMs, non-transparent PBMs. We have to stop this practice.
This is the first time I've really looked at this slide, and this sounds like personal experience from you in trying to get the data, the plan's own data from the PBM.
Exactly.
All right. And so, they talked a lot about it. I'm wrapping up here, so just stay with me. They talked a lot about getting access to the data. We talked about eliminating asymmetric information. And by doing those two things, what we're able to determine is how much the PBM is being paid to PBM. I don't know how many RFPs we've participated in, more than I'd like to admit. And maybe in the back end, it's happening. I have some doubts there. But we're not being asked for our members and our claims history. What are we paying you? If we hire you, How much are you going to make per year? It should not be an arbitrary answer. How much the PBM is being paid, you should know from day one. It should not be based upon the claims history, which is the way it's been done for 2 decades. We know how much it's going to cost to provide you the service with an account manager, a financial analyst, the call center, an account executive, an executive sponsor. Maybe there's some carve out programs, step their PAs. We know what that costs. So why don't you know what you pay the PBM? This is a formula we crafted in our Certified Pharmacy Benefit Specialist program. We call it EACD, Earnings After Cash Disbursements. The PBM's earning after cash disbursements. Everything in green is cash into the PBM's bank account. Then the PBM pays the bills. It's got to reimburse pharmacies. It's got to pass back rebates to its clients. Whatever is left over is what the PBM is being paid to be the service provider. This is what we have to get to. The discounts off of AWP, the price benchmarks being used, the minimum rebate guarantees. They are important, but they can also be distractions from what's really important. Here's a fun fact. Here's a fun fact. We've already negotiated what you're going to pay for the drugs. That's done before you hire us. When you pay us more than what we paid to the drugs, it goes right into the PBM's bank account. The PBM ideally should be paid a per member or per employee per month fee. No other revenue. Why? Because this is auditable. It's easy to audit. You just need the information to make sure that these things aren't happening. The future is this. Whether you buy in now or you buy in 5 years from now, this is the future. It used to be not even a year ago where the conversation was a PBM couldn't be a fiduciary. The traditional PBMs sold folks that mess. It's always been untrue. It can't be forced on us, but we can voluntarily act as a fiduciary. And when that language is in the contract, it provides the client financial protections when the PBM doesn't act as a fiduciary. It makes its money one way, and everything contractually in terms of other potential hidden revenue streams have to go away. I will add one small twist to this. The PBM can be fiduciary and still, and I touched on this earlier, and still generate revenue from mail markup or a retail markup if the client knows exactly to the penny what that revenue amounts to, and it's radically transparent. It cannot be opaque. If it's opaque, it's not fiduciary. And 5 years ago, it doesn't matter what the starting PM is. The cost reduction is consistent across our book. Because at the end of the day, the drugs are the drugs, the cost is the cost. You might have some PBMs that get a point or two lower or higher than another PBM, but price is inelastic in the pharmacy world. You would think that Express Scripts or Caremark get, an 80% price advantage over Transparent RX because they're so much larger than us. It's not true. It doesn't happen because they don't make the drugs. This client we brought on in 2020 at $57.88. In the first year, including our fee, we got them down to $23.12, a 60% drop. Today, in 2024, they're at $42.86. We haven't pulled all the leverage yet. No international procurement, no 340B yet. The client and the broker have just been reluctant to pursue that. And we're pushing for that. But even still, the cost is 26% lower than what it was 5 years ago. This is what's happening. When I talk about earnings after cash disbursements, Prime Therapeutics gets better rebates than we get. They get better pricing from the pharmacies than we get. Their RFPs will present as if there's no way we can compete. They know what you want to see. At a minimum, if you believe that Prime Therapeutics gets better rebates than we do, they got better pharmacy contracting than we do, then why is their fee, why is their service fee $35 PM, which is the difference between these two? Here's the thing that gives me chills every time I see this, and I've seen this now for at least 5 years. We've had this as a part of this webinar. The thing that gives me chills is that Prime Therapeutics is paying essentially itself with a blank check more than what the drugs cost. It is the PBM's fee for being the PBM that is driving the cost. If we can do it at 23 bucks, so can they, but they charge way too much. So when we talk about PBMs are adding cost to the supply chain, this is how. It's not the drugs, because if they mark up the drugs egregiously, where does it go? In their bank account, in the form of a service fee. I like to back up our claims with testimonials. And this is the broker for the client that was on the previous screen to back up everything that I'm telling you here. And this is true across our entire book. We've had conversations. Tyrone, why is your cost 30% lower than everyone else? Well, because our fee is lower. It's not the drugs. It's not the rebates. Our fee is lower. And I'm wrapping up here. Price is important. Discounts off of AWP, NADAC plus, rebates, all components of price. It is important. But don't allow the focus on price to diminish the importance of the clinical programs and the benefit design. If our generic dispense rate book wide is 91% and a competitor is 84, 85, that's not good. On 1,000 life or 1,000 member case, that can be the difference of as much as $750 to $1 million. Because the PBM's focus isn't on cost containment for the client, because you can do that and still achieve a high net promoter score. It is, let's get some high cost drugs through our own pharmacies so we can benefit from the rebates and the spreads, the network spreads. Dollar for dollar, revenue to the PBM is a cost to its client. Even though that dollar to the PBM might only generate 10 cents in profit, but it's a dollar expense to the client. That's our time today. Listen, I apologize. First time in 10 years, my internet crashed during a webinar. But here's our contact information. I'm going to leave this up. We've got some time for some questions. If you have any, raise your hand and we'll unmute you. So we'll stick around for a few minutes, but raise your hand and we'll unmute you if you have any questions. We appreciate your time. There's a raise hand feature on your control panel, just in case. All
Hey,
right.
Tyrone.
Yeah, it didn't look like we have any takers for questions. Yeah, so appreciate you, and then we'll talk here the next day or two.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, buddy.